Immigration and international travel concerns and mediation. That is our topic for today. Part of the series, Mediating with or Without Attorneys with Tye Bourdony. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by InstantMediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hi, everyone. Mac Pierre-Louis, attorney, mediator, and arbitrator working throughout Florida and Texas.
And Natalia Orłowska-Czajka, advocate, mediator, and arbitrator based in Warsaw, Poland.
And I'm Tye Bourdony, full-time mediator and primary mediation trainer based in Central Florida in Orlando.
All right. So we're back with a topic regarding immigration and international travel. Now, these issues come up in mediation all the time. And the reason we're talking about it is because we had just done another episode on relocating of children, whether it's in-state, from a specific county, from a certain city, or abroad, and moving the child to another country. So we had a lot of fun with that. But now we're delving down also to immigration concerns, and then what happens when when you have disputes over international travel, whether it's traveling for the child or traveling for the adults. So one of the reasons that we are bringing this up is because immigration, which always seems to be in the news, has been on fire in the news, particularly recently. We've all seen scenes involving Haitian migrants down in Del Rio, Texas, for example, down in South Texas. And we did a recent video on this with some attorneys, immigration attorneys, talking about that topic. But we've also, we know that in our time, migrants traveling country to country, caravans, parents taking children abroad, these things are on the news frequently. And especially in the states of Florida, Texas, California, big states with lots of immigrant populations. So in this topic, we're glad to have again with us Tye and Natalia to share their expertise on and what they've seen when we deal with these kind of disputes. So Tye, you up first. What have you seen come up frequently when on the topic of immigration and family mediations?
Yeah. So for the most part, a standard issue that we are going to talk about is issues surrounding passports, issues surrounding traveling that will take place between parents and the children. And sometimes you will have the issue of immigration, right? That is the status of one of the parties in mediation. And it's a very sensitive topic for any one of a number of reasons, right? Specifically for the individual who might have some issue with their immigration status. And so, typically they are very worried, they are very concerned, and they're not sure what's going to happen in mediation there. And so it's tough sometimes to kind of breach this topic, or you might have someone on the other side who is trying to use someone's immigration status as leverage in mediation, right? So when that issue comes up, those are the kind of, ugly heads of conflict between parties that has this larger kind of, just as you were alluding to, that we're dealing with in society today. And so when it comes up, somebody sometimes might want to bring it up because, let's be honest, they want that person to be reported so that they no longer have any issues. And so once in a blue moon, someone will kind of bring it up to me. And or the opposite, right? Someone is very closed off and you'll understand, or they'll tell you it's because they're concerned about their immigration status. And so if it's the first issue, and that is it being used as leverage, I'm going to let the parties know in no uncertain terms, I cannot in any way enable negotiation with somebody being forced to do something because they're going to be reported, or this is going to happen to them if. On the contrary, that is not good faith. That is not something a mediator can do. Right? The self-determination of the parties is in some ways paramount. Right? They have to be able to freely and willingly come to agreement. So that is not something that I'm going to report. That is not something that is going to have leverage in that regard. Right? And I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just saying when it happens, and that's the way it happens. Or in the opposite, someone is simply concerned because of their immigration status, and you can tell that they're holding back. I want to let them know, listen, nothing that we talk about here is going to be reported, right? The only party who's going to see anything that we're talking about is the family judge in this case, right? And they're not looking at it from the perspective of trying to comply with immigration and or to report immigration issues. If they're going to look at it, they're going to look at it from either an equitable distribution perspective, or they're going to look at it for the best interest of the child, but not because your status is going to become at issue. And so I need to put them at ease in that regard, or I have to tell the other party, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be reporting this when it comes up like that.
You mentioned passports, Tye, and I think that it is something very interesting, and I do believe that Mac also has a lot to say about how do we handle passports and the passports issues and travel with or without papers. What can you say about it?
So it comes up every mediation when there are minor children, right? Specifically when we are talking about time sharing and then we're talking about vacations. One of the next things I'm going to talk about is, well, do parents, do you agree that when either of you are time sharing and you're going to go away on vacation, or if you're just it's your time with the children and you're going to leave the state or you're going to leave the country, do you both agree that the other parent can do this? And so they will have this discussion. And then typically we're going to also include timeframes for notice, right, from one parent to the other, so they can tell them, so they can be aware, so they will know and get all the information with respect to the plane or the train or the flight number, when it leaves, where it goes, where it leaves from, where it arrives, the times, where are they going to be staying, what's the contact information, so that parties can, one, know where their children are at all times, can, two, know with certainty that they can reach their children, that they can talk to their children, right? If need be, and they're going to know when they're leaving and they're going to know when they're coming back. And then typically the notice, right? So let's say whether they're going to another country or whether they're going just on a cruise, because once you go out 7 miles, now that's an international trip, right? And so who's going to hold the passports? One. And when is the parent holding the passport going to give it to the other? And can they expect to get it back? Right. So typically the notice. So if you're traveling internationally, it's something like 30 days notice. The parents can agree on more. They can agree on less time. And if you're traveling domestically, it's like 15 days notice. Again, you can agree on more or less time. Then, okay, when is the parent who's traveling going to tell the other parent all the details, the travel information and what have you? And that's going to be a certain number of days before that travel takes place. Well, when that happens, and it's going to be in writing, and typically email or, will work. It doesn't have to be a letter, but it can be. That's when they're going to give them the passport, right? And I'm going to write that in there. And then by the same token, they're going to get that passport back when they arrive back, and the minor child then goes from having time sharing with the parent who just traveled, going back to the other parent. That's when that passport is going to be given back, right? And so I want to bring that up. It's really important to bring that up. And sometimes, I know in the last time that we had this discussion, we talked about the Hague Convention. This is the place where a lot of times it's going to go into the language. And it helps parents. Sometimes for any one of a number of reasons, there are concerns, there are issues. New parents, a lot of times is where you see this, because they're just so nervous, right? Your first child, you worry about everything. Your third child, you're like, yeah, it's fine. but one way or another, when it comes up, this is the place typically where we put it in. The question is, well, what does that language look like? And does it also include the State Department language, if a country is now on the list or not? But I'm also going to ask, well, when the child needs a new passport, who's going to pay for that passport? Right? Are the parents going to equally share that cost? Typically, both parents have to be together to get that, right? So if documents need to be given, they agree that they will share them within a reasonable amount of time. And if they're really going crazy, you want to be very specific with respect to what that time is, that they will work together to get that done. And by the same token, I also like to ask, well, what if you're traveling and you lose a passport? Is the parent who lost the passport, are they responsible for replacing it? And people love when I ask that. And they're like, yes, they are. So that's the way I typically see it.
And Mike, what is your experience?
So the issue of parents going to the post office for the first time, applying for a passport for their kid, and then discovering, they need the other parent's signature.
Right.
Like that comes up so often. And so whenever we're doing a custody order, I'm still surprised that a lot of times people don't even put it in there. They don't address it, and they just discover that they're going to have a fight when they go to the post office.
That's right.
So it's best to just address it up front and have written into it all the rules that Tye just basically brought up, right? Who's going to hold on to it? Where's it going to be stored? How are you going to exchange it? When do you give it back? And so, yeah, automatically we throw those things in there. And then when it comes to travel with a child, again, like Tye says, we got to address where you're going to go and all that good stuff so that parents know that their child's going to come back. But what happens when you mix the two things of immigration and international travel, where one parent might not have papers to, to be in the country legally, but they're a parent and they have a right to their kid. But let's say they want to do some traveling, not just within the country, but even maybe internationally with whatever documentation that they might have in their possession, maybe going across the border and then coming right back. What about those situations where a child could be traveling with that individual? Tye, what's been your experience? Has this come up?
Yeah, it does come up from time to time, right? And I'm trying to think of a scenario that didn't happen like what I'm going to say, but for the most part, if one of the parents has some kind of issue, their status is yet to be finalized, and or other. A lot of times they will simply say there shall be no international travel until such time as, and then whatever the situation is, we're going to find some appropriate language. And so more often than not, the parents kind of understand that issue, and the language will simply be something like, it's not going to happen until such time as. Now, generally speaking, things like cruises, for instance. Now, that can be a place where it's a little more loose. That is, do you need a passport, or do you just need some kind of documentation that's notarized saying, so-and-so can travel with my child? So in those kind of instances, there can be language that says, both parents agree that they shall provide any and all documentation as necessary and or requested in order for travel to take place. But we're talking about vacations in that regard, right? But when the immigration hot button issue comes up, a lot of times people are keenly aware that there's a problem, and the way they address it is either by not addressing it and just foregoing the issue, or saying this issue shall be addressed at some time in the future once immigration of the parties is no longer in question. Something general like that. But I want to say, and I'm trying to think of a situation that happened otherwise, but typically that situation is such a big deal that the parents just address it in such a way that we're not going to address it right now, but we'll address it, either we'll agree to disagree, or we'll agree to agree, or, something other than, just because it's a difficult issue that worries them, and it's tough to put your finger on that sometimes.
When it gets really interesting is when there are child support arrears and it is combined with the issue of the passports. Mac, can you say something more about it?
Yeah, so I've had a situation come up where dad might owe a ton of money in back child support, and he is a US citizen, he has an American passport, but he frequently travels, or he wants to travel, or he is from a foreign country, he was born in another country, and he wants to go back and visit relatives. However, he needs to, renew his passport or apply for the passport for the first time. But usually it's the case of renewing the passport that's been expired. And then when he goes to apply for it, he is told, hey, you owe a lot of back child support. You can't get your passport because there's a hold on it. And so this passport hold is going to be done by every 40 agency in this country, in the US, because their system speaks to the State Department system, and you can't get the passport released until you've made some kind of plan or on the arrears debt, or you've paid off the arrears debt to get the hold to be released.
Right.
So I've had lots of opportunities to negotiate those over the years. So obviously the best piece of advice is don't get into the debt to begin with. Okay. That's easier said than done, because a lot of times you find, life kind of takes you somewhere you don't want to go, and you realize you have a whole bunch of debt. But if it's really important that you be able to internationally travel, and it's really important for you to have that kind of freedom and liberty, and to be able to do what you want with your life, and go somewhere else and live somewhere else, then it's extremely important that you find a way to work this thing out. A lot of times you can handle it at mediation, because you might be able to make a deal with the other parent on the arrears that's owed.
Right.
Okay. Now you can't negotiate, well, you can't, get the government involved at the mediation. However, if you can make a deal with the individual, with the other parent, and then you can affect your arrears, then you can reach out, with a new judgment, with a new lower arrears balance to the government, and get them to do their part. So it's one of those,
Still a process, though.
Exactly.
Not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, that's correct. But it's one of those, I think it's one of the only unique instances where the travel of a parent is impacted, not just the travel of the child. But Tye, could we, Natalia and me, speak a little bit to leveraging of a person's immigration status at mediation? Okay, it's the typical situation. Well, let me let you go ahead. What's the situation?
Actually, there's one more thing I wanted to add to what you were just talking about, but of course that leverage issue is really important. But that is this. So yes, right. Child support, for instance, child support is by guidelines, right? That's for the child. It's not for mom. It's not for dad. They're not supposed to negotiate what child support is, so to speak. But arrearages are another thing entirely. Arrearages are like alimony. They can be modified, right? And or someone can waive arrearages, right? But there's an instance when even arrearages can't be waived. And so if someone is getting something from the state, Medicaid, food stamps, now the state has an interest in that being paid back. So then the other parent cannot waive it. Correct. And now you still have to pay it. So it can be, and then you got to get in Florida Department of Revenue. Now you got to get, pay everything if that's the case.
Thank you for bringing that up, because it's important when we say that this show doesn't give legal advice. That's important. The other thing we want to make sure people understand is that they got to do their own research, because we are speaking from 3 different jurisdictions. Okay. Right. And so in Texas, for example, you can negotiate current child support. You can negotiate the back arrears, but like Tye just said, in Texas, as in Florida, you can't negotiate away arrears you owe toward Medicaid, CHIP, TANF, food stamps, whatever else. Okay. So it's best not to let yourself get into that debt to begin with. So you don't have to have that kind of problem. But if you do, sometimes there's ways you can work it out but go to mediation so you can take care of it. But again, back to leverage. This is a big topic. This is going to be our last topic because we're 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
But Tye and Natalia, please, guys, go ahead. What's been impressions that's made on you as to how one parent wants to use the other parent's quote unquote illegality in their country as leverage to get what they want?
And let me tell you about my example, which wasn't actually about the kids, but about two adults. A Polish man who married a lady from Africa, from one of the African country, whose the status, therefore, in terms of immigration, depended on the existence of this marriage. As long as the marriage went well, all was fine. But when they started breaking up, the man started actually reporting the wife into the immigration, just wanting to remove her from the country. And of course, the marriage itself was an umbrella that allowed the lady to stay. But yes, a lot of people wish to use the immigration issues against the other one. That seems unfair. That is also unfair in terms of just marital duties between the spouses. That can be unfair in terms of also the children's rights to see the other parent. Again, mediation is a safe place when all that can be calmed down, can be dealt with in a civilized manner. Tye?
Let's be honest. We do see that intent sometimes. And I think, like I kind of mentioned before, what I'm not going to allow is, as the guardian of the process, right, is someone's self-determination to somehow be impacted. No one can be forced to do anything in mediation, right? So I'm going to report you unless, now that could be a criminal act. It could be someone's immigration status. It could be any one of a number of things. That threat cannot be used in mediation in order to gain that leverage, in order to get the agreement you want, because that agreement was not reached because someone is a willing and mutually agreeable party, but rather because they were afraid a mediator has to stop mediation at that point, and or let everyone know, I can't do that, I'm so sorry, and then find the other places where you can help them move forward. And if you cannot, well then, we're not going to have agreement. And are those issues could someone still continue? Sure, I've seen people report and what have you. But in mediation, that is not going to be something that is going to in any way sway the mediator's role, right? I will not do that, FYI, right? So that's my perspective, is this is what I need to watch out for, so to speak.
All right, so we're beginning to close out now. And one of the takeaways from this is that the parties need to know out there that mediators have certain ethical requirements they have to abide by. Okay. And one of them is going to be to make sure that the parents, the parties, the actual parties to the mediation process have self-determination. They're the ones whose lives are going to be impacted by the decision, not the mediators. The mediator's job is there to just facilitate an agreement and help the parties come to their own agreement. So when one party chooses to place a mediator in the awkward position of them being some kind of hammer of justice to bring the law down, the governmental law down on top of somebody's head, most of the time the mediator can't play that role. Look, if a child is being abused or an elderly person is being abused, certainly the mediator has a duty to report those kind of abuses. But parties just need to be aware that the mediator is there not to threaten or bully or corner someone into, complying with another person's requirements, but is there to make sure that both parties genuinely come from their own hearts to reach their own agreement that they're going to live by. Okay, guys, that is it for this topic of immigration and international travel. And we hope you found it educational and enjoyable. So until next time, we'll come back with another topic, and we will keep on visiting with Tye. Thanks so much.
Stay well.